The film begins in 1950s America, with Humbert driving a car and telling himself that Lolita is his life and his love. Then, in a flashback, we see Humbert as a 14-year-old lad living in France with his lovely sweetheart Annabelle. Even at the age of 14, they adore each other and have intimate relationships. But happiness does not last long because Annabelle died of a sickness, and the occurrence had such an influence on Humbert that he hasn't recovered yet. Back in the present, Humbert is now 40 years old and works as a teacher. He is still grieving and hasn't married anyone. He accepted a job offer from Beardsley College in Ohio, America, and must begin work there the next semester. Humbert intends to travel to America for 3 months before commencing his position at the institution in order to spend his summers there. He sees a house he could rent out due to someone's recommendation. The property is owned by a widow named Charlotte Hayes. As soon as he enters the cramped, disorganized home, he decides not to stay there. When Miss Hayes brings him to the lawn, he finds her teenage daughter Lolita lying there with a water sprinkler on her, exposing her undergarment. Humbert can't take his gaze away from her since he's reminiscent about his lost love, Annabelle, and Lolita. Lolita gives him a smile as well. Humbert now has changed his mind and has chosen to stay in this house at all costs. Humbert has moved in with Lolita and Mrs. Hayes. He keeps sneaking glances at Lolita, and even though she is aware of it, she doesn't seem to care, letting him know that she is also interested in him. Lolita is only 14 years old, yet she has evolved psychologically beyond her years and understands what Humbert wants. She never misses an opportunity to flirt with him. On one occasion, Lolita approaches Humbert while he is doing work. She speaks to him and then sits on his lap, acting as if nothing is amiss. It's simply another indication that Lolita adores Humbert. Mrs. Hayes, Lolita's mother, is also attracted to Humbert and wants to marry him, but she is apprehensive because of Lolita. During a walk with Humbert, Mrs. Hayes shares the news that she plans to send Lolita to a summer camp to encourage her involvement in extracurricular activities. Humbert is dissatisfied with this decision as it means being separated from her. He tries to dissuade Mrs. Hayes from sending Lolita to the camp, but she informs him that she is already enrolled and paid for it, leaving Lolita with no choice but to attend. Despite Lolita's lack of desire to go, her mother's persistent arguments leave her with no alternative. It is time for Lolita to leave for camp. Humbert awakens later than usual that morning, just as she is preparing to go. He dashes to his room's window and stands there, watching her. Lolita also observes him staring at her. She gets out of the car and rushes inside the house, informing her mother that she has left something essential behind. As soon as she enters the house, she rushes to Humbert's room, leaps up to hug him, and then kisses him passionately before departing. A day after Lolita leaves, Humbert receives a letter from Mrs. Hayes. In a letter, she professed her feelings for him and proposed marriage. He rejects her at first, since Annabelle is his only love, but it's impossible to deny that he's pulled towards Lolita as well. He marries Mrs. Hayes in order to be close to Lolita. They married, but Humbert is uninterested in Mrs. Hayes and makes every effort to avoid having an intimate affair with her. He sometimes gives Mrs. Hayes sedatives to avoid intimacy with her because Lolita is now his only interest. Mrs. Hayes remains clueless about the true reason for Humbert's marriage to her and the relationship he has with Lolita. One day, while cleaning the house, she stumbles upon Humbert's private diary. After reading it, she comes to the disturbing realization that Humbert married her solely because of Lolita and sees some unsettling words he wrote about her in the diary. Confronting Humbert, she expresses her understanding of his true motives. Despite his attempts to calm her down, she leaves the house in an agitated state to post a letter, but tragically gets hit by a car, resulting in her instant death. Humbert is saddened by her passing, but his focus shifts to his closeness with Lolita now that there are no barriers between them. When Lolita's camp comes to an end, Humbert goes to pick her up. Upon seeing her after a long time, he falls in love with her all over again. Lolita acknowledges their marriage and considers him her father, expressing gratitude for his role in her life. Humbert decides not to disclose the news of her mother's death and instead pretends that she is hospitalized due to illness. During the drive, Lolita begins changing her clothes in the car, and Humbert, unable to control his desires, glances at her through the car mirror. Afterward, when Lolita sits next to him, she brings up the fact that he hasn't kissed her, which prompts Humbert to lean in for a kiss. However, their intimate moment is interrupted when a police car stops them and starts questioning them about any suspicious individuals or vehicles. Humbert informs Lolita that they will be staying in hotels for a few days due to some unforeseen circumstances. Lolita comes up with a suggestion to travel around America and stay in different hotels, which Humbert agrees with. They decide to begin their hotel tour and check into one. While Humbert is busy at the reception dealing with some paperwork, Lolita playfully approaches a pet dog, and its wealthy owner, Claire Quilty, remarks on how the dog rarely enjoys others' company but seems comfortable with her. Quilty introduces himself and compliments Lolita's beauty. When Humbert calls her, she returns to him with a mischievous grin. Due to financial constraints, Humbert tells Lolita that they have to share a room. While in the room, he helps her remove her shoes and socks, and the relationship takes on a more romantic tone, nearly crossing over to a sexual level. Though people perceive them as father and daughter, they act like a couple in their private space, sharing everything. After spending some time in the room, Humbert steps outside for some fresh air, where he encounters Quilty. Quilty inquires about his relationship with Lolita, and Humbert explains that she is his stepdaughter and that her mother has passed away. Quilty then extends an invitation for dinner, which Humbert declines, thinking that he might be a police detective investigating Mrs. Hayes' death. They check out of the hotel the next morning and resume their adventure. Lolita asks Humbert for a few cents when they stop at a gas station so she can call her mother. Humbert is now forced to inform Lolita that her mother was killed in an accident. Lolita groans in memory of her mother's death. She refuses to let Humbert into the hotel room and continues to mourn for her mother. After blubbering alone in the room, she joins Humbert and lies close to him. He consoles her by embracing her and vowing never to abandon her. They continue on their journey, staying in several hotels. They eventually end up in Ohio, where Lolita enrolls as a student and Humbert begins teaching at Beardsley College. Humbert is too insecure for Lolita because the school has a co-educational system and supports programs with girls and boys together. And foremost, they encourage pupils to date each other so they can become familiar, which will benefit them in the future if they marry each other. After a few days at school, Lolita asks Humbert for permission to participate in a screenplay, but he initially refuses. However, Lolita begins to seduce him, promising more intimate moments if he allows her to join the play. Succumbing to his inappropriate desires, Humbert ultimately grants her request. The following day, he visits her at the auditorium during her rehearsal as a witch and discovers that the organizer of the screenplay is none other than Quilty, the man he met at the hotel. Humbert is concerned about the connection between Quilty and the play, but feels powerless to do anything against him. Back at home, tensions rise when Humbert confronts Lolita about her friend Mona, suspecting she may know about their relationship. An argument ensues, and in the heat of the moment, Humbert smacks her feet off the table. This angers Lolita, and she reveals that she has earned enough money from the play to leave. She warns Humbert that if he continues to be rude, she will go away. The statement drives Humbert over the edge, and he impulsively slaps her across the face. In a state of distress, Lolita accuses him of murdering her mother. She storms out of the room, sobbing, and calls him a murderer as she runs away. Humbert goes after her, trying to calm her down, but she grabs a bicycle and flees. He continues searching until he eventually finds her in a store. There, he apologizes to Lolita and offers her to take her on a tour of wherever she wants to go. Lolita agrees, and they leave the hotel the very next day. During the road trip, Humbert becomes suspicious of a car following them and believes he is being tracked by a detective. He asks Lolita to note down the license number of the car. At a shop, Humbert goes inside to buy sunglasses, and when he comes out, he notices a peculiar man wearing a hat chatting with Lolita. He rushes to find out who the man is, but he's already gone. When questioned, Lolita nonchalantly explains that he was asking for some address. As they continue their journey, Humbert becomes increasingly convinced that they are being followed by someone who is changing the car frequently. Having decided to stay in a hotel for a few days, Humbert leaves to get household items from a supermarket. Upon his return, he notices the same suspicious car parked outside their hotel. He starts spying on it from his bedroom window, and Lolita playfully acknowledges his actions with a smile. However, Humbert also observes that she has messy hair and lipstick marks on her face, suggesting she might have kissed someone. In a fit of anger and insecurity, he grabs her and demands to know whom she kissed. Lolita's laughter exacerbates his emotional state as he fears losing her. Later, a powerful storm wakes him up at night, and he becomes fearful and delusional. After washing his face, he regains his composure, but the terror lingers, leading him to pull out his gun in search of an imaginary threat. That night, Humbert and Lolita leave the hotel to find another place to stay. They eventually find a guest house, but Humbert notices Lolita shivering with cold and decides to take her to a nearby hospital first. The doctor admits Lolita for one night and asks Humbert to leave since he can't stay here. Humbert reluctantly departs. The next day, Humbert calls the hospital to check on Lolita's condition. To his surprise, the nurse tells him that Lolita has been discharged early in the morning with her uncle. Confused, Humbert goes to the hospital to confirm but finds that Lolita is nowhere to be seen. He investigated all the surrounding hotels for her, but all he found was the same handwritten signature with different names in each hotel they stayed in during their tour. He is convinced that the man who has been following them is responsible, but he has no idea who he is. He makes numerous attempts to locate Lolita, but at last is unsuccessful and returns to Ohio. 3 years later, Humbert receives a letter that starts with "Dear Dad," and as soon as he reads it, he realizes it's from Lolita. In her letter, she reveals that she is now married and expecting a child. She opens up about their financial struggles and humbly asks for his support. The letter stirs up a flood of emotions in Humbert, and he decides to visit her. He makes his way to the address provided and arrives at a small and unattractive chalet located outside of town. Humbert knocks on the door, and to his surprise, Lolita opens it. She is no longer the young 14-year-old girl he once knew. She has grown into a pregnant woman who now wears glasses. Despite the years that have passed and the trials they've endured, she warmly greets Humbert as a daughter and offers him a genuine smile. With her invitation, he steps inside her home, ready to provide the support she needs during this new chapter of her life. When Humbert sees her husband, he recognizes that he is not the man who had been pursuing them because he is too young and the other man is nearly his age. He queries Lolita about her hospital pickup. She identifies that man as Quilty, who brought her to his mansion. She goes on to add that he is an adult movie director who captures teenage girls at her age to use in adult films, but she escapes his mansion. Then she told Humbert that she felt embarrassed by her conduct and had chosen not to contact him again, but that she needed to contact him about some financial concerns. Humbert gazes at her affectionately and extends an invitation for her to return to his home, though she kindly declines, expressing her decision to remain with her husband. Despite experiencing another heartbreak, Humbert musters a gentle smile as he hands her an envelope containing $4,000. Emotions well up inside him as she expresses gratitude for the gesture. While making his way back to his car, he catches a final glimpse of Lolita, and memories flood back, envisioning her as the innocent 14-year-old girl he once knew. Taking his leave from her residence, Humbert's path leads him to Quilty's mansion. Humbert arrives at Quilty's mansion and is taken aback to find him without pants, which only fuels his anger. He confronts Quilty, demanding to know why he has destroyed both his and Lolita's lives. Unfortunately, Quilty seems to have forgotten who Lolita even is, as he has harmed so many young girls. Overwhelmed by rage, Humbert reaches a breaking point, pulling out his gun and firing multiple shots, resulting in Quilty's untimely death. As he drives away from the scene, bloodstains on his face serve as a haunting reminder of the violent encounter. The scene shifts back to the start of the movie, when he saw Humbert driving with blood smudges on his face. The police are now hot on his trail, seeking to apprehend him for Quilty's murder. Eventually, Humbert decides to stop his car and willingly surrenders without resistance. He is subsequently arrested and imprisoned for his grave crime. At the end of the film, we see a note stating that Humbert's life was cut short due to a coronary thrombosis while he was imprisoned. He died on November 16, 1950. Furthermore, on Christmas Day of the same year, Lolita meets a terrible end, dying while giving birth. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. By clicking the bell icon, you'll stay updated with our latest content. We look forward to having you join us in the next video. Take care.